Welcome to the Go Slow to Go Fast lifestyle podcast, where we explore what it truly means to live with intention, calm, and clarity in this fast paced world. Today on Go Slow to Go Fast, we're exploring what it really means to choose intention in a world designed to keep us constantly distracted. I'm joined by Kelsey Green, who works at the intersection of digital minimalism, community, and accountability. She helps busy professionals reclaim focus without losing ambition. In this conversation, we talk about how deliberate choices around technology, time, and relationships can actually expand our capacity to do meaningful work. We dig into what minimalism looks like in real life, why in-person connection still matters more than ever, and why moments of discomfort, whether in nature or leadership, can become powerful catalysts for growth. We also explore the role of community in achieving ambitious goals and how to rebalance priorities without shrinking your vision. If you're craving more focus, deeper connection, and a way to pursue your goals with intention rather than urgency, this conversation will resonate. Let's dive in. I have an amazing guest with me today, Kelsey Green. She's agreed to sit down and chat with me for the next hour, and I hope that you will enjoy our conversation. So first off, Kelsey, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am really excited about our conversation today.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. I kick off my interviews with a question of how do you go slow to go fast these days? So if you don't mind just kind of letting our listeners know a little bit about you and what you're doing these days to go slow, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, my name is Kelsey Green, and I have made that transition that a lot of us have made from our 9-to-5 jobs into entrepreneurship. And I am, it's been life-changing for me, honestly, and have learned a lot of lessons along the way, as I know that we all have, right? And currently, I have a couple different arms of my business. I serve state and federal agencies in strategic communications capacities, particularly around water policy and interagency liaising. And then I also do accountability coaching and, I hold retreats. And lately, I have been talking a lot about digital minimalism. And, to your question and to the theme, which I think is a wonderful theme for your podcast, going slow to go fast. So one of my goals for my life is to not be working all the time. With that said, I really love to produce and I love to be very effective, right? And so I feel like what I've been working on, and I know we'll get to this, but in the groups that I lead, what I am working on with them is cutting out the chitter chatter, all the ways that our attention gets fractured, and being able to actually focus again, right? And produce the work. Now, when you do that and you're working less hours, I don't feel like you have to spend so much energy decompressing. I feel like in the old days, in my 9-to-5, I would need to take a week, offline. And I think that's great. Being offline is great, but I would have to have that, and doing all the self-care stuff, going to the day spa, just like sleeping in so late, all of that stuff. I would need to do that before to be able to operate in that environment again. And I feel like I've really moved into a different era where I don't want to have to take a break from my life or have to decompress. I want my life to be sustainable, right? If that
Yes.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like when you're on a diet, you kind of think about all the food that you love and want to consume. And you just think, okay, if I just have a consistent diet, I don't have to go on these, juice cleanses if I just kind of do everything in moderation. So kind of like your work-life balance it sounds like you've found that happy medium of having moderation of time online, time in work, time for play.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Kendra, I love that example actually, because I used to be really into the Whole30. And I think the Whole30 is a cool program to do like once or twice. but I was doing it consistently over and over again because I hadn't yet found a sustainable way to eat, right? That let me have treats once in a while, but was consistent and doable,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
I know.
So I think that's a great
I know.
example.
Yeah. And it's something that if you think about it throughout your life and all the things you do, it's kind of a good way to kind of have that mindset going in of like what you value and what you want your day to look like. But thinking about digital minimalism, I'd love to know kind of how you got into all that, like thinking about that concept and how you're kind of walking through that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, from the start, I was pretty resistant to having a cell phone. I didn't really want to have one. It
Mm-hmm.
became, I'm in my early 40s, right? So after, at some point, it was like, I wasn't getting invited to things anymore. I was like losing track of my friends. Okay, everyone had a cell phone, fine. I got one. But I was never really that excited about it, honestly. And I don't think I've ever owned a TV. So except for like to use as a VCR or something, I haven't actually owned a TV. So from the beginning, I'd say I sort of embraced this. But then, especially once you become a business owner, then you think, okay, if you're a new consultant, I think a lot of us fall into this trap where I have to be available all the time to my clients, or I'm not going to be able to keep my clients. I'm not going to be able to do my work. And you set yourself up very well to be trapped in this dynamic, right? Yeah. So I was there just like the rest of them. I was feeling very tied to social media. I was checking my email constantly. And thankfully, I never quite got to the point where I was setting up sound notifications for all of my apps. So I never quite got to that point, but I was just there with everyone else, right? And then some things started to happen. I started to feel like that empty, low feeling, where you get on, let's say, the platforms to do a business thing that you probably need to do, right? You need to post something, you need to be out there creating content, whatever. And then, you'd end up, oh, I need to support some of my business colleagues. So you're doing that. And then an hour and a half has gone by. You have no
Yeah.
idea what's happened. You haven't learned much and you feel yucky, you know?
It's
I
like the
started
twilight zone of scrolling, and it's the new twilight zone, if anybody knows what that is. Yeah.
I do. Yeah. So, I think that's a really common experience. And then in my relationship, my the most recent relationship, my partner was also a business owner and he was in pretty deep. And so he felt like he could not go even a couple hours without checking his social media platforms.
Mm.
And he needed to have sound notifications on all the time. And, we were in a long distance relationship. So we saw each other, infrequently. And in that space, it'd be just the sound and he'd be scrolling and I had started down this path of thinking like, I'm not sure that this is the way, for us
Yeah.
to be interacting as humans together in the same space.
Mhm.
And it started to create some problems because as I started moving down this path, I had yet to realize that this was a new value. And so I was just testing out these little strategies like, hey, can we just be off our phones and we're together? Or hey, like, why don't we check our social medias tomorrow? And it became a little bit problematic. And that was really illuminating because it helped me understand, oh, I think I might be going down a little bit of a different path. And then I spoke to another business owner and she called herself a digital minimalist. And I was so intrigued because her business was completely online. I think yours is online, mine's on. So it was this crazy concept. How do you do an online business and be a digital minimalist? Right. Yeah. So I can go into that a little bit, but I'd love to hear any thoughts that you have.
Yeah. It's interesting you said the word illuminating, which I find also intriguing, that you are somebody you've shared that you didn't own a TV and hadn't really been, and you weren't much of you were like a late adopter as far as, you know,
Yeah.
technology anyway. But you slowly kind of started to realize that you had to have at least a footprint out there in the world of, online as we know it now. But it's just interesting to me that you were as I guess, observant in your relationship about how this could really erode the time that you had together if you both were going to continue on this path of having constant interruption. So I think you were figuring out your boundaries early, which is great. I just don't know how many of us came to that conclusion maybe as quickly as you did, seeing it how it played into your personal time.
Yeah, thanks. I wouldn't say it was the cleanest experience. It got kind of messy and there was a little bit of drama around it, and I wasn't acting my best either. But yeah, I suppose, walking that path of being there with everybody else and then starting to feel like I feel the other thing is I have a digital course called How to Build Your Circle. Years ago when I was first conceptualizing this, the idea was, okay, it's clear. The data is, very obvious, very clear now. There's so much data that we are becoming farther apart. There's less in-person interaction, right? We know that, especially for young people, as you know better than I do, certainly. And so I was creating this course, and the early versions of the course included getting out there in the world and, how to make friends, especially as an adult, right? Maybe like your 30s, 40s, 50s, how to make friends. And then the second iteration of the course, I realized that our phones are becoming part of the problem and one of the massive hurdles for us to actually get out there and create these relationships. So I started building this into the course. So now the course is about how to do the things, how to make friends, how to take that little leap from chit chatting with people to actually, building a relationship with them. But also, an entire module now is about setting up digital boundaries in your own life. Because if you are obviously glued to your screen, if you're in your house just on your phone, it's probably not going to help you make new friends. If you're out in the world on your phone, that's not going to help you either, right? So it became apparent to me that this is so important for us both in our in-person relationships, but I think for business too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's just interesting. A vision, kind of a memory popped into my mind. It was my wedding day. And anybody listening out there that was from my friendship circle in the Washington, D.C. world, I'm sure you will remember this. I had when you get married, you have different, or when you have like a celebration of family, you have different groups of people that are from different times of your life. And I remember all my soccer friends, softball friends, like all my sports. That's how I made community connections when I was a young 20, 30 something, when I moved to a new area. That's how I got to know people outside of work. So it was like work, then you had like whatever you were doing after work. And I had 2 jobs. Like I would waitress after I was working for a school system in the evening. So I had like all these different friend groups. Never did they ever intersect until I got married. And it was interesting to me to see my friends from the sports realm all sitting at the same table, because that's what you do when you go to these functions. You might all be grouped together. So they're literally sitting at a table on their phones. If you're listening out there, you know who you are. And if you know, they were literally on their phones, and they were Generation X like me, like we'd been without phones for many years. And then we started introducing phones into our world and our social network. So we knew how to make friends, but then it was like this new thing. And I got married 10, 9, 10, yeah, 10, 9, 10. So they're all sitting at the table texting each other. And there was a friend of my husband who is 14 years older than me, and his wife sitting at the same table going, I can't believe they're sitting here texting each other and not talking to us. And I'm like, yeah. And I was thinking like back then, like, I really hope that doesn't become a normal thing, but if we're not careful, it's going to,
Do know, yes. And I think we're in an interesting age group because we knew what it was like before cell phones, before smartphones specifically. It was really when things changed, right? And we see what it's like now. And we see our friends of our same generation moving that way. For the young people, oh my gosh,
they've been there, done that. Like they don't know any different.
right. And that's a whole different topic.
Other
And
baller wax. Yeah.
sad and scary, and The Anxious Generation is the best book I've read on this, right? And so that's a different thing. And people come to me a lot and ask me about their kids. I'm like, okay, I'm not a parent. there's other people trying to work on that issue. I'm talking about us. I'm talking about people in our age group, the adults. And here's the thing is that it's
Having
tough to
kids and not
blame.
knowing how to navigate that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's tough to blame people because, as I'm sure you've heard, there's so much money getting pumped into making these things as addictive as
Yeah.
possible.
The
And I'll
apps
just
and
yeah,
all the things on their phones. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just make a quick pitch for this book, Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. Really, honestly, anything by Cal Newport, but especially if you're thinking about how to be more effective at your work and producing, right? I think these are just amazing books. But, the data shows, and it's just very clear at this point that our brains are not wired yet, maybe eventually, but not yet, without some concerted efforts to withstand the effects of, how addicted these are created for our brains. So it's hard to
And
blame people,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could see it coming 10, 15 years ago. It was like a new toy, but now it's like an appendage. It's part of our bodies. And we've got to really be mindful about making that separation.
Yeah, and I guess that's when I talk to people about how to take these baby steps
Hmm.
towards doing this in your life, I try to be really upfront with people that it's probably gonna be a little tough,
Yeah.
right?
And that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah,
That's fair.
and tough, but critical. Critical. I believe this is critical for our lives, right? I wanna tell you a funny little story. So I started a challenge called Screen Free Sunday Challenge, and there's other challenges like this. This isn't a super new concept, but I honestly thought it was going to be kinda silly for people, like, "Oh, obviously we can all spend a day off screens, like, this isn't really a challenge." The first one that I ran, no one could do it. No one could do it unless they took themselves. I have a lot of backpacker mountaineer friends. Unless they took themselves out of the woods and they were literally out of service, then they could do it, but otherwise, no one could do it, and I was shocked. "Oh my god." And so we started talking about this. I started asking people, and they said, well, why don't you do a, 2 hours off screen challenge? Or my favorite was only one screen at a time challenge.
But
And
that's where we are. That's
I
fair. That's
know,
fair. Because right now I'm
absolutely.
looking like around my little space where we're doing this podcast, and I do have two screens up. So that's fair.
Well, sure. Yeah. And so I'm working on a digital boundaries mini course, and that will help with the starter steps, the little baby steps towards this. But this is a challenge, right? It's supposed to be challenging, right? Although it's not supposed to be impossible. So I realized that people are kind of starting from different places, and it's going to take some intention to get us to a place where we can set those boundaries in our lives, right? With our phones. Yeah.
And you're talking about adults, and I'm feeling a little guilty thinking about as a former educator, administrator. I was in a school this time last year, and every kid has a device, and they're supposed to because a lot of their textbook materials are online. So parents out there listening, and it's a thing. It's definitely going to be a challenge as more kids, see that that's a necessity and that's part of work. But then there's also, we got to think about intentionally having time off of devices and what that looks like.
Yeah. And I've talked to other educators too, and you and I have chatted, and I feel for teachers. Just, whew, I don't know, like, it must seem like a losing battle, but I take heart because I feel like this is starting to enter into legislative realms. More people are talking about this. There's a lot of discussion around it because I think that we're seeing the mental health of, both young people and adults start to suffer globally, right? And you can track that the data follows the exact arrival of the smartphone specifically, right?
Yeah. And it didn't help that COVID hit and we were all disconnected, and that was the only way we could be connected for a while. It reinforced it. And then trying to come back out of that into a school environment, it's a whole other thing. So, yeah, we just have to we're acknowledging that, but we also need to kind of set that aside because the work you're doing is working with adults and trying to figure out how to balance all of this and have a productive time at work, but also a happy life, or at least a life that's more balanced.
Yeah, and I think I want to make sure to stress the point that I do think that this is possible. And I don't think anyone's arguing that technology hasn't helped us in some ways, that there aren't very clear benefits to some of these digital platforms. I use there's lots of apps that I love. I use a Whoop Strap. This is without a screen, so it can be kind of annoying sometimes because people think it's a watch, but the data is somewhere else, and so I'm not messing with it. There's no notifications on it, whatever. But I do want to be clear that I think there's immense benefit to technology, and that I believe and others believe that we can use it in an intentional way and set those boundaries and take the benefits, right, without it wreaking havoc in our lives. And that's really the concept of digital minimalism. I think that term can be really scary to people because they think about, minimalists in terms of your stuff. And like, oh, I can only have 4 shirts, and 2 pairs of pants. And so if you apply that to digital minimalism, it's like, people might assume you mean throw away your phone, never use the computer. Like, absolutely not. The point is, how can you optimize the use of your tools to use them as tools instead of having them use you and having it take over your life?
That's so true. I don't know, it kind of along the same lines of that sci-fi reference I made to the Twilight Zone. There was a episode of the newer Doctor Who. It's on Disney. I don't know if you've ever seen that show or the old Doctor Who, but this is one of the newer versions of the Doctor Who series, and it was really thought-provoking. There was an episode, I watch it with my kids. It was called Dot Bubble. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a little scary. It's a little scary. It's like a little thriller kind of thought-provoking where people in the future they literally have the phones as part of their body, and they don't know how to literally get up in the morning and do their daily routine and walk without having a screen in front of them. And so they get to the point where they're being eaten by these alien worms that are literally 5 feet away from them, but they don't see them because they've got this screen in front of them. And all they have to do is turn it off and it goes away, and then they can run away from these things, but they don't, because it's so part of their life. And it was mind-boggling to me. I'm like, this is where we're going. This is ridiculous.
I mean, there's so many cautionary tales in literature, right?
Yeah.
Going back a long time. This isn't a new fear, right?
It's not. No, technology and advancement and all that. When really, human connection is what we need to survive. That's what we need.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So digital minimalism, is it attainable? Like if there's somebody out there listening who's like, yeah, I think I probably don't spend more than 2 hours on my screen or phones. And, they get that feedback from their devices.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably doable for somebody like that. But somebody who has screens on all the time and feels like it's just an appendage and they're not really sure if they can pull back, what are the benefits of doing that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Thank you. Yeah, I guess we haven't talked much about the clear benefits, right? So I'll just talk about my experience. There's a lot of data out there that you can look at. Just, it's very easy to find. But I'll just talk about my experience. So I decided that I wanted to work on this. And I'll make the point that digital minimalism is a personal, set of values that you decide, and your use of the technology is going to vary, right? Depending on what your goals are and what your values are. So it's different for everyone what that means. For me, it means I want to get up really early in the morning, and that means I need to go to bed early because one of my values is health and wellness, which means I'm shooting for 8 hours of sleep a night, right? So that means that I am off my screens. This is my journey. It's not perfect every day, but I'm off my screens by 7 p.m. So that means no Netflix, no more work, and no phone, right? And I will just note for people that I know that many of us need to be in touch with people, your emergency contact, you have kids, right? You have aging parents, whatever. So my mom is the person that I worry about when I'm off my phone. And so what I do is set the breakthrough function on iPhone for her and my stepdad to come through, right? And my ringer's on loud. So I'm on do not disturb. Otherwise, my ringer's on as loud as it can go. And if one of them calls, it will break through. Otherwise, no sound, and my phone is in my closet, or I can hear it still, right? If she were what this does for me is, oh my gosh, every night I don't want to do it. I want to keep watching Netflix. I want to hang out. There's this interesting cultural assumption that I don't know that it's like cool to like be on your screens and watching Netflix, like scrolling, like, you
Yeah.
know, I
Like
don't know.
watching it together, but not in the same room and commenting together. Is that what you mean?
Or just that, like, well, I think we've really moved away from the idea that boredom is good. And it's almost like we glorify, being busy, being productive, being connected, being on screens. And so I guess my point is that it feels a little lame sometimes to be totally offline at 7, it could be like 1850. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Is
there's
it
so many
more
cool
fear of
things.
missing? Is it like fear of missing out that you're going to miss something that's going to be pop culture and discussed the next day? Or is it more you're not connecting with people who are doing that?
Well, for me, it's just a little bit like I'm so used to having things in front of me. I'm so used to listening to podcasts, all day. I'm used to listening to audiobooks. I'm, watching Netflix, whatever, that when that stops, the silence, this is what a lot of people experience. The silence is very jarring, and it's only you and your thoughts, right? So I think that's what it is. My social media feed is extremely curated, right? And I really manage my social media use heavily. So I'm not like, oh, I'm missing out on scrolling or whatever, but it's just that silence. The great news is the benefit, to get back to your question, is then I go to bed early, you know,
Yeah,
and
because
I
you
read my
wind
book.
down and you're not overstimulated.
Right. We know that the blue light in your eyes keeps your brain awake, the dopamine, you're foraging for this cheap dopamine, all these things. But really it's just that you don't have things going on in front of you, and you just go to bed, really, for the evening. So then I get up early. I'm not on my screen on my phone, excuse me, until 7 a.m. But I do writing in the mornings. I can get on my computer. My goal, this is my ultimate goal, like I said, it's a journey, is to only check my email once or twice a day. Right now, I've got active clients, and I launched my mastermind starting in fall. So, I'm like still in that email trap right now. But mostly in the morning, I try and focus on work. Now, here's the best, most clear benefit I can tell you is that, I guess, too, the sleep, better sleep, longer sleep, right?
Hmm.
But the other thing is, without my phone around me, it's still in the closet, I can focus so much better, right?
Mm,
By setting up these boundaries in my life with my screens, I'm able to produce the work, right?
yes, right.
And yeah. And I think one of the clearest detriments that they're finding for the way that we're utilizing these platforms is fractured attention.
Mm,
And there's all these women, and I'm not a doctor, right? So that's a disclaimer, but all these women are being diagnosed with adult onset ADHD. And I'm not saying that's not real, but I will tell you, when
right.
you start to work on this stuff, your focus does change a little bit. I thought I had ADHD,
Mm,
right? And I'm a
mhm,
pretty
mhm.
hyper individual in general.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I started doing this work, and the ability to push through and complete the tasks and focus. And when literally your phone's not only no sound notifications on, but not even within your sight,
Mhm.
it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and I would say I would say I've also wondered, do I have ADHD or is this self-inflicted because I have things interrupting me all day? And part of that was the job of what I did before. I mean, I would have humans coming to me all
Yes.
day long with problems and problem solving. But I was always one that silenced my phone to the point where it was probably detrimental because like if I had a meeting and I was, it was a day where kids weren't in the building. I wouldn't know somebody was at the doorbell because I didn't have my phone on and they were texting me. Like, there are certain things like I'm like that person that silences everything and I don't even know. And so people would be like, okay, Kendra doesn't have her phone on. But, if the people that and how they operate and you make your values really well, clear, then people know, she must have her phone off or her phone's in the closet and so we just need to make sure we notify her tomorrow or she'll check her email at this certain time. So as long as you're communicating, your boundaries. I think that will work. I
Yeah.
don't think it makes you less productive. I think it makes you more productive, like you said.
That's been my experience. Absolutely. And I will say, I'm also seeing some research come out that texting less and
Mhm.
being less available on the phone strengthens our in-person relationships. Now, I will
Mm,
say, of course, if you're cousins across the country, and
yeah.
you never get to see them, I'm not saying don't text or don't talk to them on the phone or whatever,
Yes,
or like
sure.
their Facebook posts. But I guess my point is for the people in your life, the less
Yeah.
available you are to communicate over text, the more you're going to be able to connect in person.
Mhm. I mean, as a joke, sometimes I will text my husband who's in the other room just to see what he's doing. And he's 14 years older than me in his 60s, and he'll be like, "Really?" But I mean, it's a joke. Like, I'm not doing that on purpose. But, I'm
No,
sure there are
yeah.
people out there that might say, "Well, I do that." But, as long as you don't do it all the time, I think we're fine. It's sometimes that that person's on their phone. So you're like, "Hey, what are you doing?"
I'm not talking about
Yeah.
like I
No.
use my phone all the time. It's not about
Yeah.
again, it's not about never
Yeah.
using your phone, never, like, doing jokey stuff or, like,
Yeah.
never just needing to, like, zone out for a sec and, like, scroll through animal videos.
Mhm.
I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about,
No.
what are the values that you wanna instill in your life that,
Mhm.
you've probably already identified, and is your use of it, for the most part, let's say
Yeah.
75% of your use, supporting that goal, that value,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, and I think you were sharing with me before we started this podcast, like on our pre-chat, about the phone just being down, face down in front of you is a distraction. Even though you think you've gotten it kind of off and away from you. If you have it anywhere in your vicinity, it's going to distract you.
I think I have that study actually, like, right here.
Mm.
Yes. So there was a paper published that showed that if your phone is within your sight, even if it's
Mm.
sound off, face down, your attention is fractured, so your cognitive ability is less, right? So
And
that's when you're
that's
trying to do your work.
fascinating.
Now you can imagine if you're sitting with your family and your phone is even face down, the same impact, right? Your attention is
Mhm.
fractured because you're so used to that little box giving
Yeah.
you dopamine hits, honestly.
Yes.
And so
Right.
you are half of, your brain is aware of it, thinking about it, and it's hard to focus on what's in front of you. Yeah. That was
Mm.
a very alarming study,
It is.
honestly, for me.
It
Yeah.
is because you think you're taking healthy boundaries, into consideration and being mindful and respectful and all those things. But it's good to know that it can be really distracting for you if you do that. Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's good to think about and consider. Like, what are some small changes besides moving the actual device out of your
Mhm.
vision? What else might people need to think about in their day routine?
Yeah. Well, I will say there are a ton of really cool tools these days, right? So there's a bunch of apps you can use, so many, right? Probably hundreds now to help you manage your time. And then there's something like a physical device like the RO box. And, it's funny. I used to think this was really stupid because it's basically a box. It's a nice looking box, but it's a box that you pay, I don't know, $100, $200 for. And then you have an ongoing membership. And all the box does is charge your phone and track the time that your phone is in the box. And I thought this was so ridiculous a couple years ago. But I've actually changed my mind about it because basically now families are doing this thing where they have a little challenge. Who has the most RO box time? Whose phone is in the box the most? And it's become a standard. I know different families do this in lots of different ways, but everyone's phone goes in the box, during dinner time, right? Da, da, da. So it just becomes part of, the flow of your day. And I think now, if you need to combat or at least try to address in some small ways your use of the phone with other technology, fine. Do whatever works. So I think, there's all these great apps. There's physical tools. There's one called the Brick where you have to have your phone, I think, actually touching this little box, scrolling through social media, right? All kinds of things like that. I will say, and there's all kinds of tips and hacks and tricks. And I think that it can get you part of the way there. So setting very hard boundaries with yourself, just like you don't wake up and take shots of vodka in the morning. You
Right.
don't wake up and start scrolling social media, right? Like, these are things that are
True.
good for you. So you start going down the rabbit hole of the data of how bad this is for your
Huh.
brain. That's a lot more convincing,
Yeah. You got to think about your phone and what it's doing to your brain. So that's true.
Yeah. So I think, there's lots of little things you can do. I think the number one thing that I tell people that are looking for baby steps is just throughout the day, testing yourself to see if you can push against that compulsion and also recognizing it as a compulsion, right? Especially when it comes to social media. So seeing, I sit with this discomfort, recognize this feeling, and not do the thing, not check my phone, not jump on and scroll. And I think that just like being aware of anything that's going on in your life, right? If you want to like eat a third piece of cake, right? Like sitting with it, what's maybe actually going on, and then working to not to not do that thing and do so, distract yourself if you need to. Do a project in your house, whatever it is. Yeah. If you wanna jump up a little bit from there, I said I run these screen-free Sunday challenges, and that will give you so much insight into if you're not sure if you're addicted to your phone or not, do 24 hours without your phone. You'll know. It will give you definitive information, right? And that's a cool
Mm.
challenge, I think. So, that's kind of some ways to
Okay.
step up a little bit.
Yeah. Or, go off grid. I mean, you've been going on these hikes recently. You were talking about how you have gone out into the wilderness on these camping or hiking trips. And, doesn't mean you have to go do something like that, but that's another way to kind of, take it out of your life for a little while because you can't get connectivity sometimes when you go off grid and see how you feel
Absolutely.
without it.
Yeah. I will say that, yes, I totally agree. And I think being out in nature on its own is incredible.
Mhm.
Doing something hard, challenging yourself, all kinds of things, right? But I will say that it's when you're in your home environment that it becomes
Mm.
the most, it's the clearest in terms of your habits, your use of it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And for, business owners out there and people who have to be on social media for your job or, maybe connecting with family if you're all over the world and you need to connect that way. We're just saying think about how you incorporate it into your day and where you can find those moments where you can be offline and or just more aware of what you're doing to be productive so you can get through your day without it taking over your life. That's all we're saying.
Probably, yeah. If you can set up those times, I think time blocking is an amazing tool anyway. And if you
Mhm.
can set that up for yourself, like, okay, I sit down for half an hour at 5:30 and I respond to all my texts. I look at my DMs, I whatever you need to do on your phone. That's great. Like, and then put it back away. So, um, and I think the same for business. Yeah, I think for business, the social schedulers, and there's like arguments that the algorithm doesn't like the third party schedulers. Okay, whatever. But I'd say scheduling out your posts, you can schedule them within the app too, right? The nice thing about third party schedulers is that you don't have to be on the app, right? So, something like Hootsuite, Buffer, Planable, whatever, there's hundreds. You can schedule out your posts and they just go out. That's a
Mhm.
great way to do it too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've just kind of started figuring all these little things out that, you can schedule your posts and not be on social media all day long if you want to post 3 times a day. And I
Mhm.
am just not that person, but I might do it once a week where I sit there and schedule all that out. But that saves you a lot of time if you're going to sit there and do a batch task. Create 3 posts and schedule. And that might be blowing some people's minds out there that are listening. Like, there's people that do that. Yes. And I figured that out last year. Like, I didn't know that was a thing until like a year ago. Did I do it a year ago? No, I didn't figure out how to do it until this summer. So, go slow to go fast. It's a thing. We all kind of have to take our baby steps of how we incorporate these, quick fixes or strategies or routines into our life. But if you're just in a position where you're just having to figure out how to use a digital calendar, That's a good idea too. Just go slow to go fast with whatever works for you. But for Kelsey, anybody who wants to work with Kelsey, we'll make sure we have all that information in the show notes, especially your Sunday challenges. Is there anything else that you want to share with listeners and viewers on YouTube before I let you go?
Yeah. Well, I guess just one last note on the theme, go slow to go fast. I try to have a little bit of grace and humor about the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that digital minimalism is definitely a journey, and giving yourself, just that grace to mess up sometimes. You need to have
Mm-hmm.
a bingy day, like whatever. It's not the end of the world, but that you're
Mm-hmm.
on the journey towards incorporating your values more so into your life and your business, right? And as
Yes.
slow as you need to go is totally fine. So just want to
Mm-hmm.
note that we can all just hopefully laugh a little bit about it too. Like, oh my gosh, how did we end up here? My gosh, what a wild
Yeah.
world we live in. This is
Right.
nuts, but we can still have autonomy over our own lives, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And having that self-awareness is where we can start, just figuring out what we're doing now and what we want to be doing in the next few months, few years, whatever that needs to look like. Go slow to go fast and don't beat yourself up, like Kelsey
Right.
said. Yeah.
Excellent.
I just really have enjoyed this conversation, Kelsey. Thank you for joining us. It's interesting to hear the research and how it really is affecting our day to day and our mental health. So,
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful to chat with you, and I hope your audience has benefited from this talk today.
we'll make sure you can get in touch with Kelsey if you want to know more, learn more, work with her. We'll make sure we have all that in the show notes. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
As we wrap up today's conversation with Kelsey, I'm reminded that focus isn't something that we find. It's something that we choose. And what Kelsey shared with us today is a powerful reminder that digital minimalism isn't about doing less or disconnecting from ambition. It's about creating a space for what actually matters: real connection, accountability, and goals that are rooted in intention rather than noise. When we slow down enough to make deliberate choices about our screens, about our schedules, and the communities we invest in, we don't lose momentum. We gain clarity. And from that clarity, meaningful progress becomes possible. If today's conversation sparked something for you, I encourage you to notice where that small shift could create more focus or a deeper connection in your own life. Thank you for spending time with us. Until next time, keep choosing intention over distraction. And remember, when you go slow, you create the conditions to truly go fast. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for choosing to go slow so we can go fast together. And until next time, the light in me honors the light in you. And as you head into the rest of your week, let your light shine through. Go slow to go fast, and thanks for listening.